Yep. So good afternoon for those in the Nordic countries, and good morning or good evening if you're in another part of the world. Welcome to this ICF Finland webinar. My name is Anna Korkman-Lopez, and I'll be your host today. An especially warm welcome to Ruth Wageman, our guest speaker for this webinar. In just a minute, I will introduce Ruth and let her take this virtual stage, but first, a few housekeeping announcements. We are, as you noticed, recording this webinar, so please take that into consideration as you participate. And if you are not wanting to participate at the moment, you can mute yourself so that we don't have any extra interesting sounds on the recording then afterwards. We're very happy to see everybody joining still, and welcome everybody. The second time I want to remind you of is that if you have any questions, you can write your questions into the chat, and we will take time to go through them and answer them at specific points. And for those who are ICF Finland members, I would like to ask you to please name yourselves in the list of names as yourselves. We won't know who it is, and we won't be able to give you credits if we don't know who it is. So please give yourselves your own proper names so that we know who has been here. So we can give you the CCU points. All right. So today we have the real privilege of being joined by Ruth Wageman. Once more, welcome. Ruth Wageman is one of the foremost scholars in the area of studying and working with teams, especially leadership teams. Ruth's research, teaching, and practice are focused on the conditions that influence superb team performance. Ruth especially focuses on teams whose purpose is to solve complex problems and lead system transformation. She builds collaborative leadership capacity within and across organizations, especially with multi-sector leadership teams working to transform health and society. Ruth has been a professor at Columbia, Dartmouth, and Harvard, where she has led many original research programs. Ruth wrote Senior Leadership Teams, What It Takes to Make Them Great, with Deb Nunes, Jim Burris, and Richard Hackman, as well as many seminal peer-reviewed articles. Ruth designed Team Diagnostic Survey with Richard Hackman and Erin Lehman. TDS is a powerful, well-validated assessment that measures how well the 6 conditions that drive effectiveness are established for a team. She also leads accreditation workshops and teaches team development professionals how to use the instrument in their practice. She has a PhD in organizational behavior from Harvard University and a Bachelor's of Arts in Psychology from Columbia College at Columbia University. She has a long list of professional experiences as visiting scholars, professor and director of research, and a key publications list that is so long that we would have to take another hour to go through it. So I'm not, we're just going to have to give you that as an extra afterwards. I'm going to give over to Ruth right now. Please take the stage, Ruth, and once more, very warm welcome to you.
Oh, thank you for that lovely welcome, Anna. It's really great to be here with everyone and lovely to see you all this evening, my morning. So I want to talk with you today about the work that Richard Hackman and I and our colleagues and students at Harvard University and other places have done, where we've been really focused on the question of what are the main drivers of team effectiveness? What are the strongest predictors? And in this conversation with you, I want to think through and play with the implications of the science of how we study teams for the art of how we intervene to create great collaborations. So that's the theme of what I'd like to do. I want to invite you first to just get into the spirit of thinking about teams. I know that many of you actually do work with teams, but many of you are also primarily in the practice of individual coaching, to reflect on a team experience that you have had, either your worst team experience or your best team experience, and to just note some observations into the chat about what made it the best experience or what made it the worst experience of teams. Just to get into the spirit of thinking about teams, and to begin putting together your thoughts about what makes something a great team, what's a sign that it's a great team, and what are some of the things that contribute to that, and the reverse as well. What are some signs that something is an ineffective team, and what contributes to that as well? So please just enter some of those things in the chat. We'll look at some of those themes together as I begin introducing you to the idea of conditions thinking as a way of approaching our understanding of team effectiveness. So if you just take a minute or so to type some stuff about your experiences in teams. Great. Okay. Having fun and being productive in a best team, utilizing the different skills of team members for the common good. Flow of work and trust. Worst, a lot of anxiety and open punishment. Best, relaxed and joyful. A worst team, everyone competing with each other. A lot of comments on the competition. Greater than the sum of its parts. Hannah saying so much more than one person could accomplish alone. In the worst teams, hidden agendas. In the best, shared values, shared goals, having fun. Total trust and reliability. When someone in the team says, I'm going to do this, it means it's actually going to be taken care of. So, there's an interesting mix here, both on the, on the positive examples of teams and on the negative examples of teams, of things that I would call outcomes, like we produced something really great, better than any of us individuals could have alone. There are some things that I would call inputs, like shared values or shared goals. And there are some things that I would call processes or dynamics, emergent processes in teams, like trust, like fun, like laughter, like hidden agendas and other aspects of negative behavior. So I want to unpack this relationship among these different things, features of the team itself, features of the processes, the kinds of outcomes, and bring a discipline to that and how we think about the science of teams and the implications that has for application. So the first question that I want to ask you, I wondered if you play along here and get into a poll. So Henna, if you wouldn't mind launching this first poll. When you reflect on your intervention with teams, where do you think the highest leverage lies? So if you were going to start in a particular place in working with teams to make a difference, would you start by building trust between the leader and the team members? Would you start by working with the team to develop psychological safety? Would you start by identifying whether there are existing conflicts in the team that are interfering and resolving and intervening in those? Or would you start by working with the team around a compelling purpose and keeping the team intact together long enough to accomplish something meaningful? So which of those do you see as the highest leverage way of intervening in teams? All of these actually are legitimate existing approaches to working with teams. But where do you see the highest leverage? And let's get a sense of the perspectives in the room. So please, is everyone seeing the poll, and are you able to submit a response? Great.
I'm seeing the results coming in already. So
Great.
yeah,
Thank you.
We have about 70% has voted already. So it's just
Great.
Give it a minute or a few seconds, and I'll hope that you can all vote. But yeah, we have a very big part already saying number 2, working with the team to develop psychological safety.
Can you share the results? Yeah, that's the winner.
That's the 48%. Let me see if I can. I wonder if I need to end polling before I
think you do. I think you'd have to end the poll and then say share
results.
Yeah.
Yeah. So anybody else wanting to vote, you need to vote now. Otherwise, this is it. All right, I'm going to end the poll, and then see if we can share it. Share results there. Can you see this now?
I can indeed. So 18%
Yeah.
about that first item, building trust between the leader and members, 47% around developing psychological safety, 7% around conflicts, and 29% around establishing a compelling purpose and keeping them together long enough to accomplish something meaningful. So it does not surprise me to hear psychological safety as the number one focus of intervention. And I would just invite you to reflect on how would you go about intervening a team to develop psychological safety? What are the points of leverage that you would act on as a coach in order to try and build that in the team? There's lots of evidence, and there's certainly lots of writing about psychological safety and its importance in the effectiveness of teams whose purposes require a lot of learning and that require innovation. And so to the degree that teams experience the right and ability to take risks and to get things wrong and to make mistakes, those are important parts of the sort of internal culture or dynamics of a team in which learning and innovation is important. But I want to actually draw your attention to item number 4 here, because it is quite different in character in the way that we think about intervening in the team. I would characterize the first 3, building trust between the leader and members, developing psychological safety, and resolving existing conflicts. Those 3 are forms of coaching that is aimed directly at influencing the dynamics of the team. So what's going on in the social process and the way that people interact with each other, and making that your primary point of leverage. The difference in number 4 is that the focus of the coaching is really about the design of the team and the structure or the performance context within which the members operate. So it really is a different point of intervention. And I would like to share some of the logic of what we have come to call conditions thinking, Richard Hackman and I, and why we arrived at this idea of conditions thinking as a scientific approach to understanding influences and team effectiveness. And we'll return to this question about how and when you intervene in just a moment. And if I don't remember later to comment on psychological safety again, somebody remind me, but I will come back to that point. Let me talk a little bit about the origins of the work that Richard and Hackman and I have been doing, and why we arrived at this idea of conditions thinking. You know, a lot of thinking about teams is consistent with the way that I was characterizing what you were coming up with around your best and worst team experiences. So there are certain inputs or design features of teams, like their goals and shared values. There are certain processes or dynamics, like fun or trust or competition or hidden agendas. And there are certain outcomes, like producing something and the team members being satisfied and proud of what they were able to accomplish together. And input process outcome models are very, very common ways of thinking about teams. And we've seen lots of evidence in the research literature that there are relationships between processes and outcomes. So commonly shown in the literature that high levels of trust or high levels of psychological safety are positively related to performance under a variety of circumstances. So we've seen evidence for that. We've also seen evidence about the relationship between inputs or design features of the team and the kinds of processes that emerge. So for example, certain kinds of problem-solving tasks tend to elicit a certain kind of collaborative behavior when team members convene, or highly interdependent tasks tend to elicit a lot of information exchange and collaboration. Unfortunately, that doesn't all add up to a guide for action. And what we have been finding in looking at the research literature is that attempts to go after the process directly does not ultimately impact outcomes. So going after trust or trying to improve psychological safety directly does not appear to improve the performance outcomes of a team, even though we have seen correlations between those two. Now, there are a variety of reasons that might be the case. One of my favorite article titles ever is a piece by Kaplan. It's quite an old article. I think it's in the early 80s. And the title is "The Conspicuous Absence of Evidence That Process Consultation Improves Team Task Performance." And the conclusion is there in the title. It's a meta-analysis of all of the studies that have been done of process intervention and its impact on team effectiveness. And what he found across these many, many different studies is that on average, there's no impact of intervening in process on outcomes. There's a handful of studies in which intervening around process actually resulted in worse team performance, typically because teams get very engaged in working on their processes and tend to forget about the work that needs to be done when they do that. But no evidence that going right after the process is a reliable impact on the performance outcomes of teams. And so Richard and I and our colleagues have been taking a different approach to thinking about what really makes a difference to team effectiveness. And it's this notion of conditions thinking. So what we've been asking is, what are the handful of designable features of teams, things that you can intentionally design and put in place that most powerfully influence the way that dynamics naturally unfold in teams and result in positive outcomes? So it's really thinking about, how do you form, set up, and design the features of a team in the first place so that a team, which is a complex social system, charts its own course to effectiveness, gets on a positive trajectory and ultimately becomes an effective team. This is one of my favorite quotes from Richard. He says that, "I have no question that when you have a team, the possibility exists that it will generate magic, producing something extraordinary, but don't count on it." And this is not him being a pessimist about teams. It's really him signaling that it takes a tremendous amount of intentionality in the way that you design, set up, and launch a team in the first place in order to get it to actually achieve magic. So what I want to do is to share with you the 6 conditions for team effectiveness that came out of the work that we've done in asking this sort of conditions question. And I want to share with you some of the common tripwires, or the common things that we encounter in organizations that represent flaws in the fundamental design of a team. So missing features of the 6 conditions that actually create the negative dynamics that we see and that cause us to want to intervene around the team processes. So what I will do is take us through the first of the 6 conditions, and then we'll pause and have a dialogue about that and its implications for coaching teams, and then we'll go through the 3 enablers. So lots of time built into this session to have some dialogue around this. The first thing I would like to do is to ask you to think about a team that you really care about. It can be a team you're a member of, or one you're leading, or a team that you are currently actively coaching, but a team that you know well. And I'm going to start by defining what we meant by team effectiveness and what we measured in our research when we assessed whether a team was actually effective. For us, every team has a client. It has stakeholders that it exists to serve. So someone is the user of that team's work, and they are the right ones to judge whether a team has actually met their needs or their requirements as stakeholders of the team. So first and foremost, we want to know, has the team performed work that actually meets or preferably exceeds the needs of its stakeholders? Now, for a leadership team, that's a very complex array of stakeholders. It can be shareholders. It will include external clients. It will include the employees of the organization. For a frontline team, that may be the clients that they serve. For the surgical team that we're looking at here, it is the patient and their families who are the key stakeholders of their work. But it's not enough to produce one great performance and burn yourselves out in the process. To us, a team is effective to the extent that not only does it perform, but it actually gets better and better as a performing unit over time. It's operating in ways that build its capability to be better, stronger, faster, and able to handle increasing challenges because it is developing and learning over time. And then finally, a team is only effective to the extent that on balance, rather than frustrating or undermining the individual members, it actually contributes something to their growth and to their well-being and development. So these are the three criteria of effectiveness that we always assess when we assess the effectiveness of a team. In the short run, there can be trade-offs among these. Since I have an image of an operating room team here at the moment, I will say that sometimes when there's a patient on the table, capacity and member satisfaction are not the important questions. The questions are, can we perform this particular surgery to the best of our ability? Whereas at other times, we may want to set aside some of the high standards of our clients because we need to invest in our learning and development and growth as a team to perform better for clients in the future. In the long run, these three criteria of team effectiveness are highly intercorrelated. So great teams actually do well on all three of these because each one of them contributes to the others over time. So that's what we mean by a great team. And we've been asking, what are the conditions that enable you to have a great team? Three essentials that we have discovered. These are fundamental building blocks that must be in good shape if you want to get anything good out of a team at all. And then three, what we came to call the enablers that accelerate the development of a fundamentally well-designed unit into a better and better team over time. So with a particular team in your mind, I want to take us first through the three essentials and some of the common tripwires that we see get in the way of teams having really great essentials. And then we'll pause for some dialogue about that, and we'll run a poll to ask you to reflect on which of the conditions really needs most attention for the team that you care about. Okay, so condition number one, it's not rocket science. First and foremost, if you want to have an effective team, you have to create a real team. And what are the characteristics of a real team? Well, first and foremost, a team needs to be bounded. So it is clear who we are, right? Who is and who is not a member of this team that actually shares some kind of collective accountability, right? That we are the members and we have a relationship with each other and an identity that enables us to understand who is a member of this team and how do we work together. And I want to show you a little bit of evidence from our research on leadership teams about the unboundedness of many leadership teams in the world. So one of the things we did when we were studying leadership teams is we would go to the chief executive and we would ask, how many people are in your leadership team? And so the chief executive in this case said, I have 11 people on my team. We went to those 11 people and we gave them a survey that asked a series of descriptive questions about the team. And one of the questions is, how many people are in the leadership team? So now what you're about to see is the response of these 11 people to the question, how many people are in the leadership team? And that ranges from 7 to 11 to 12 to 13 to 15, all the way up to 84. And a second example, in this team, the chief executive said, I have 5 members of my leadership team, and those 5 people said there are 7, 8, 9, or 5 members of the team. Now, these are entertaining examples. What's more alarming is how common they were. So of the 120 plus teams that we studied, only 11 actually agreed on the size of the team. So leadership teams in particular are seriously underbounded. And now why would that be? And why do we see underbounded teams in organizations? Now for leadership teams, it may be in part because there are actually multiple leadership teams serving at the top of the organization, and their functions and their membership have never been adequately clarified by the chief executive. So for example, the person who said 84 in that first example is probably not crazy. They were thinking about what we think of as the least interdependent leadership team, the information sharing or alignment team, the senior leadership cadre that at sub-abstract level holds responsibility for leading the enterprise. And they may convene periodically just to exchange information about what's going on in their areas of the business. They don't do anything or perform anything together. They merely exchange information in order to be operating in a greater alignment. Slightly more interdependent is what we call a consultative team. This is a seriously underutilized kind of team in organizations. So this is a team, again, they don't produce or decide anything together. They come together for the purposes of providing consultation to a leader about a decision that that leader has in his or her portfolio. So I might bring a challenge and say, here's my best thinking about how I'm going to approach this. I would really benefit from your advice and counsel, any blind spots you think that I have that I should take into account. And I can go away smarter and more capable in the work that I do as a consequence of this team coming together. More interdependent still as a coordinating team. Now this is a real team that shares collective accountability for accomplishing something together. So this would be a team that is responsible for implementing an organization-wide initiative and making sure that the timing, the sequencing, all the pieces come together in a way that makes sense for the enterprise. And then most interdependent of all is the decision-making or the task-performing team. So this is a group of people that will, in consensus, decide something for the enterprise or perform a piece of work together. Most of the leadership teams that we see in organization are really only operating down at that information sharing or alignment level. And they are typically what I would call teams in name only. So they may be all the direct reports of the chief executive. In many cases, things that we get invited to coach, teams that we are asked to coach, are really all the members of the same department or all the people that perform a particular job function. They are not a bounded group of people that is genuinely interdependent for a common purpose. So I'm sharing these kinds of teams with you because the level of interdependence goes from lowest to highest here. And part of the definition of a real team is we need to exchange information and resources with each other in order to accomplish some collective purpose. So back to real team. A real team is bounded. It is clear who is and who is not on the team. It's stable, meaning we are together long enough to actually accomplish something significant together with not a lot of transitions of people in and out of the team. And then finally, interdependent for a common purpose. We must actually work together to accomplish something together. And many of the leadership teams that I've encountered are, as I said, teams in name only. They're underbounded, their membership shifts with regularity, and really they're just the collection of individuals who are responsible for leading different areas of the business, and they do not decide things together and they do not perform work together. Now that is a designable feature of teams, right? The level of interdependence and what you ask of them to do together is actually a designable feature of teams, and it's the first of the essentials. So thinking about the team that you have in mind that you care about, to what degree is this team actually a real team? Is it bounded? Is it stable? Is it interdependent for a common purpose? Do they really need to work together in order to accomplish something for a shared accountability? So that's condition number one. Condition number two is a compelling purpose. I see a lot of teams they might have goals or objectives, and that is not the same as a compelling purpose. A purpose is the reason that the team exists and its contribution to the success of the enterprise and its impact on the lives and work of others. Many teams in organizations do not have a compelling purpose because the purpose of the team, even the leadership team, is not the same as the mission of the enterprise. It's also not the same as the individual roles, right? It is a unique added value of the team over and above what the individuals contribute. And it is not merely to execute someone else's strategy. It is a statement of the unique added value of this team to the success of the organization, the things that we must do together that only we can do that enable the enterprise and its success in some way. And the characteristics of a compelling purpose are, first and foremost, it's clear. So we would know what success would look like if we were to achieve it. It's challenging, meaning what is being asked of us as a team is going to require our best capabilities in order to accomplish it. One of the things we often see in organizations is that individuals are very over-challenged and that teams are very under-challenged, that what we ask of people to do together is considerably less engaging and challenging than what we ask them to do individually. And it also is consequential. It has real, meaningful impact on the lives and work of others. And what we have learned in our work with teams in organizations is that it can be a complicated conceptual task to articulate the purpose of a team. And it has three pieces. I often recommend that teams start with the middle one, which is what are the handful of things that we must do together that only we can do, that will contribute to the success of the larger mission. So what's the actual work that we do when we convene? And raise that to a level to express the unique added value. So what is it that this team exists to accomplish or produce or lead that has a real and meaningful impact on the success of the enterprise? So that's essential number two, a real team with a compelling purpose. And that brings us to the, yes, I wanted to share this example with you. It can actually be helpful to see a particular one. This is a COVID clinic, a respiratory clinic team that I coached, and I was working with them. We actually put out an offer of pro bono coaching for teams that were on the front lines and needed some help developing as a team. And 8 weeks, about the beginning of June, so 8 weeks into the COVID pandemic, they had just come back past the first really intensive peak of their work. And this was a brand new clinic. They had been stood up in their health system to treat outpatients. So this is an outpatient clinic rather than a hospital clinic. And at this 8-week point, in working with them and reflecting with them together on what features of their team design might need some attention, they recognized that their purpose was actually shifting. To this point, they were really mobilizing in crisis circumstances to treat as many patients as possible and to deal with COVID and COVID alone. And at this transition point, they were beginning to say, we need to go back to also providing some of the basic primary care that our patients in this vulnerable population in a particularly resource-challenged part of Massachusetts, there are many other things that we need us for. And moreover, we have been one of the few frontline clinics that has been intensively treating outpatient COVID patients, and we have learned a lot about patient care in an outpatient setting, and also follow-up and the continuation of symptoms over time that we need to share with the larger community. And so what they crafted as their new purpose, and this was working directly with the co-leaders of the team to bring a draft purpose to the team so the team could shape it up. They articulated that this team exists to care for their vulnerable communities that are at the highest risk of and from COVID, including the primary and secondary harms, and to rapidly adapt to serve the emerging needs of the population. And a handful of things that they must do together is partnering with their communities and patients to generate priorities, to integrate new knowledge, develop clinical guidelines and pathways so that they're actually standardizing the best of what they have learned around the care and disseminating best practices to colleagues in other places so that their most vulnerable patients have access to safe, clinically excellent, and empowering care. All right, so this was at an important pivot or transition point in this team, and I think it underscores the idea that a team's purpose actually is a thing that changes as the context changes over time, and that revisiting the purpose in a way that allows the team to experience that clarity, consequentiality, and challenge, and that is fit for purpose at different times in the life of the team, is part of how we can support them around compelling purpose. Which brings me to the third of the three essentials, and that is having the right people on the team. And we actually find that many teams have what we would call the wrong people on the team for a variety of reasons. I think probably the most common one that I see is that we conflate the organizational structure with team membership. So if we're all part of the same department, we all report to the same leader, we're all fulfilling a certain kind of role, that defines the team. Well, in fact, that doesn't define the team. It's actually the interdependent work and what people must do together that defines the team. And that may not be all of the people in the department, or it may be different configurations of people in the department forming different teams. A second reason that we see teams that are not well composed is that, particularly when we're forming a team that has to solve a problem or make a decision that's going to affect many different areas of the enterprise, the logic is we have to include somebody from each of those areas, thereby getting a 15-person team, many of which who really are not authorized to make decisions on behalf of the part of the organization they're from, and you have a team that is too large and too diverse to actually get anything done effectively. Now, I'm not against inclusiveness, but there are better ways of accomplishing that than giving a large number of people a seat at the table. A third reason that we wind up with teams that are poorly composed is that it is a very difficult challenge, emotional challenge, even for very senior leaders, to remove somebody from the team and to say this team is not well composed, it needs to be reconfigured. And then finally, I see a lot of team leaders inherit a team and take the team membership as given and not consider the possibility that they can act on the composition of the team in a way that would allow them to actually shape up a much more effectively composed team. So condition number 3, the right people. This is the aspect of composing a team that we generally do think about. So given the work that needs to be done, what are the capabilities, skills, and experiences that they need to have that can contribute to the purpose? What we tend to overlook is that if you're going to ask people to work in teams, you also want to compose a team with people who have demonstrable teamwork competencies, have shown the ability to work well and to collaborate with others in close interdependent work. Thirdly, there's no point in having a team that is made up of people who all bring the same perspective. To get the kind of creative abrasion and synergy around creating something that is greater than the sum of the parts, you need diversity in the membership of the teams. Ultimately, what you're looking for is cognitive diversity, diversity in their experience and the perspective they bring to bear. And then finally, we found that that there are what we came to call derailers. There are people who are destructive of the dynamics of any team that they are a part of. And that doesn't mean you need to remove them from the organization, but they do need to be removed from the team. Most typically, the characteristics that we see in derailers is that they actively undermine other members of the team, and they can do it in a very charming and humorous way. And they also tend to bring out the worst in others. I don't know if you've had the experience of interacting with a colleague and find yourself walking away thinking, you know, every time I talk with that person, I find myself becoming my most petty, mean-spirited, the worst version of myself. If you've had that experience, you know what I mean by that kind of derailer. So condition number 3 is the right people, and it is the third of the essentials for a reason, and that is the purpose of the team. Why we need a team in the first place and what it exists to accomplish should drive the membership of the team and not the other way around, right? So what is it that needs to get done, and who can actually contribute to that in a constructive way? So given what I have said about the 3 essentials, these are the 3: a real team, a compelling purpose, and the right people. I want to pause now and invite you into a little poll here to think about this team that you care about, that you've had in mind as we've been talking so far, and identify what aspects of the team most need attention. Does that team need some work around the degree to which it's a real team? Bounded, stable, interdependent? Does it need work around its compelling purpose? Does it need work around having the right people? Or do all 3 of them need about the same amount of attention? So I'll leave you to complete that poll. And Hannah, thanks for putting that up. And you know, when you're ready to close it and share us, let us know. I just want to take a look at what's been coming up in the chat and see if there are things that that we might want to address right now.
Right.
So Pirko, I appreciate your comment that you can build psychological safety through discussing and finding the common purpose. I think that's a very important and excellent insight that, in fact, if you look at Amy Edmondson's research, where she originally crafted the psychological safety construct and measure, what you find is that teams that have a compelling purpose, that have shared norms of conduct, that promote admitting errors and working together to correct errors, and where the team leader is really modeling that kind of behavior, that's where psychological safety emerges. And you're quite right that conversing around that compelling purpose and why we feel connected to it can create that kind of psychological safety. Eva, the compelling purpose shifts focus where we relax and get creative. That's a nice turn of phrase to explain one of the many things that having a compelling purpose does for us, right? It connects us around our values. It engenders energy around the things that we care about, and it also aligns us so that we're all actually headed in the same direction. And we can trust that even when we're not together, if we're committed to that purpose, we're still actually headed in that same direction. Great. So where are we? So the essential that needs the most attention for the team you care about, compelling purpose, is out in the lead, followed by real team, and then followed by all about equally. That for me actually is my most common encounter, that teams actually need a little bit of help on each one of those. So let's take a moment to actually have a little conversation about this. For those of you who said that your team needs some work around compelling purpose, what do you see about their purpose that needs work, and what are your thoughts about how you might actually be helpful to that team in raising the quality of their compelling purpose? And please feel free to put your hand up in the participant list, or come off mic and ask your question, or add it into the chat.
I don't see anybody raising their hand, so you can just come off mute if you want to. Oh, there. Go ahead. I can't see your name now.
Is it Gauri?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Hi, so this is Gauri, and I coach a consulting team in Singapore for a BFSI client. With this thing about compelling purpose, which was the option I selected, I find that it's a management consulting team, and they have been doing a lot of technology projects. So I coach a senior engagement manager in this team, and from this individual coaching, I'm transitioning to coaching the whole team because I see a lot of problems. They don't know what they are supposed to be. I mean, their essence is confusing to them. They're pulled on projects, and I think if I were to start with this team, I would want to ask the leader of this team, what is really the purpose that you have here? Because people are not sure. And from there, begin a host of issues. So this is my 2 pence here.
That is a great example, and I think your instincts there are lovely. So in the kind of, we'll talk about this a little bit later, but in the kind of team that you're engaged with, it's a team with a leader. It's probably a self-managing team in the sense that the members have lots and lots of input in how they go about doing their work, but the leader has more authority about their purpose and the kind of work that they do, and who is actually involved and configuring the team. And in that kind of authority structure, the first place to go is you're exactly right. It's having a conversation with the team leader about, what does this team exist to accomplish? What would success look like? What are the really mission critical things that a team like this could accomplish? And how could you articulate that to them in a way that would be clear and that would actually be compelling? You can also take an additional step beyond that, which I do with my the teams, and the COVID team that example is a case in point, which is if you do a little offline coaching with the leaders and help them shape up a really good draft, you can then help them bring that draft to the team and invite reactions, starting with the question, what really resonates for you? What lights you up? What language about this do you really connect with? And then what questions do you have? What might be missing? How would you want to amend this? So that you create the opportunity for the team itself to co-own the purpose that they're working towards. And very often the team really shapes up that purpose statement in a way. It's not to say that the leader isn't coming with a good draft, but it winds up being much better after the dialogue between the team and the leader.
Thank you so much, Ruth. There was a question I had put in the chat box, and it also relates to this team. Do you recommend any assessment tools, leadership assessment tools for team composition? I ask this from the perspective that in consulting, and I coach Accenture, I coach EY, there is a movement of people that I do not find in other industries. Yeah. The team gets put together, they deliver to a project, and then they're off.
Right.
And what happens is this factor, this thing that you said, team composition is so important, it doesn't really get taken care of. There is staffing. Of course, there's a whole team that looks at team staffing, but they look at skills. And what you described as the team, the three pointers to what really makes a team are not taken care of when staffing for a project is done. So do you recommend any tools, or do you have your own?
I do. I actually invented my own for exactly that reason. I appreciate your question. Most of the tools out there are individual assessments, and individual assessments can be helpful in this context, but you have to have the team map first. So usually what I do is create a matrix, and I list the key capacities that have to be present in the team, some of which it's okay for only one person to have them. Some of them, like team competencies and the ability to work well with others, everybody's got to have those. And I create a matrix of that. And then I take my potential team members and put X's in the box where I'm confident they have that capability. And then I'm looking at the configuration as a whole, including the diversity of the team and the range of experiences they have. So it's actually a pretty simple rubric, but and it will look different for every team because every team needs a different array of capabilities. But that's the main distinction. What are the capabilities and competencies that is needed for this work? Who among the potential team members already has it? And if you're looking at an array in which there are clear missing spaces, there are certain capabilities you don't have, the question then becomes, do we need to add another member to bring that capability, or is this a developmental agenda? Is this something that some member of the team needs to learn, grow, develop in order for us to be fully realized as the right people for this teamwork? Now that is actually considerably easier to pull off if you've got an intact team that's going to stay together for a while. In the circumstances you're talking about, you're basically using this matrix over and over again every time you configure a team.
Thank you so much. If you would share your email, I might have some questions for you later on this. I don't want to take the time of everybody on the group, but thank you very much for addressing my topic.
Yep, my pleasure. Hannah, I see your question about a typical process about clarifying and agreeing the compelling purpose. I kind of just described it, which is unless I'm working with a self-governing team, and a self-governing team is a team that has come together as a group of peers for their own purpose. In that case, I would be working with the team as a whole, and I have a very structured process to do that. One of the risks of team purpose work is that teams are terrible at achieving clarity. Teams are not good at it. Individuals are much better at it. So with most kinds of teams, I'm starting with the team leader and working with them to think through what are the mission critical things this team needs to achieve, and helping them to draft a purpose to then share with the team and get good quality feedback from the team that the leader will then take away and do a modification. That I'm relatively rarely asking the team to do editing or modification in real time. With a self-governing team, it takes a different kind of structure. And so I use a variety of different techniques. Usually what I'll do is something generative that gets the team to just lay out a bunch of themes in what will be better in the world if they're successful, what are the mission critical things they need to accomplish. And then I have them individually take a shot at writing the team purpose, and then read them aloud and reflect on what they're getting out of each of these attempts at a purpose that really resonates for them. Ultimately, I have them nominate an individual to go away and shape it up into a compelling purpose, because, as I say, individuals are much better at this than teams are. Teams tend to sand down all the clarity and the sharp edges by compromising too much. So don't try to whiteboard a team purpose. Any other questions or reflections on the essentials? Real team, compelling purpose, right people, before we dive into the enablers? All right, then let's turn to the enablers. One of my favorite ironies about leadership teams is everyone wants to be a member of the leadership team, but nobody wants to go to the meetings. And that is often because our teams experience meetings as a waste of time, that what's actually happening in the convening is not significantly progressing the work. It's not enabling us to move closer to accomplishing our purpose. And the most common causes of that we see in organizations is the group is too large to actually make decisions or do coordinated work. So they devolve to mere information sharing, because that's all that 20 people can do when 20 people convene. They're not going to be able to land a decision. They're not going to be able to progress pieces of work together. A second reason is that very often we're convening because we have a regularly scheduled meeting, but the purpose of today is not very well defined, and it isn't about completing critical pieces of work together that will actually progress the team purpose. Thirdly, very often what winds up on the agenda is there are too many items. They're trivial. They may be urgent, but they're not necessarily strategic and critical for the team to wrestle with. Or some of the things that wind up on the agenda are what was on the mind of the person who put it together and don't really make sense to be tackled by a team. A lot of times the mere process of how we set agendas for team meetings, trying to be inclusive, asking people what it is they want to talk about, what you get is whatever is top of mind, most urgent, most tactical. That's what I want to talk about when you ask me the question. And that is not setting up a team with the structure to work on the critical pieces of work that will seriously progress the purpose. And then finally, we often are very poorly structured in how we convene meetings. So it's not clear whether we're making a decision or just starting a discussion about something. There isn't really an understanding of how an agenda gets built that is really all about our purpose and the interdependent work that we need to do that. And we just don't have good rules and expectations of how we operate together, which leads me to a little preparation, or overwhelming preparation. A lot of times the information sharing is happening because there's no discipline of sharing information in advance and expecting people to have read all that. So we come together ready to really dive into the big questions we need to work on together. So the first of the enablers is what we came to call a solid or a sound structure. And it has three pieces. First of all, the team is the right size. It is not too big to accomplish anything meaningful together, and it is not too small to really be able to do the work together. Meaningful team tasks, so what we're actually working on when we convene, is directly related, is high priority, interdependent work that will actually progress us on our team purpose. And thirdly, we have clear norms of conduct. We have a set of agreed upon norms and work practices that really enable us to dive in together and to make significant progress on the work. What I'm showing you here are the data from the leadership team study, in which we took the outstanding teams. These are the teams I think there were only 16 of them in the sample, that were meeting the needs of all of their stakeholders, were getting better and better over time, and were actually places where leaders learn and grow and develop as a consequence of their work on the team. And we divided those from the mediocre and the poor teams. And we found that the single variable that most differentiated the outstanding teams from all the others was the presence of clear norms of conduct. Right? They were different on all these dimensions, but the really big difference was the most whopping effect size was the magnitude of the difference in the presence of clear norms of conduct. These were teams that had harvested the lessons of their experience about what got in the way of them doing real leadership work together, making good decisions, being nimble and strategic in how they operate. And they had figured out a set of rules, what must be done, what must not be done in the way that we work together. And that was an incredibly important aspect of promoting their effectiveness. So condition number 4, the first of the enablers, a sound structure. Condition number 5 is a supportive organizational context. So every team operates in a larger context, and that context has structures and systems in it that can either put obstacles in the way of teamwork or can actually promote and improve the likelihood of excellent teamwork. So for example, many of the enterprises in which we work and people are being asked to work in teams provide no positive consequences for team excellence. All of the rewards, all of the feedback are actually at the individual level, and even worse, people are in competition with each other over valued rewards, right? Not reasonable to expect a team to collaborate closely under conditions where the individual members are actually directly in competition with each other for valued outcomes. So first and foremost, a supportive context provides some positive consequences for team excellence. And I want to underscore that just rewarding people on the basis of team effectiveness does not induce collaboration, but the absence of rewards can actually be a powerful negative. It can undermine their willingness and ability to collaborate. There's lots of evidence in the research literature on reward systems that when there are very large differentiations among the individual members of the team in what and how they are paid, or if there are very large differentiations between the leader and the rest of the team, that can actually cause a lot of withholding of collaboration and mistrust as a consequence of feeling a lack of fairness. Information systems. Is the information system actually designed in such a way that our teams get the critical information they need in a timely way to make good judgments about whether our approach here is actually working or whether we need to do course corrections? Or is the information system designed in such a way that the information is at too great a level of detail for us to see patterns, or it's not provided to us in a timely way so we don't even know whether we are making significant progress? So information systems that provide the data the team needs in a form that they can use. Education systems that provide the training and technical consultation when we are encountering something new as a team. Can we reach out and get training or support around these novel challenges so that we can continue to perform effectively? And then there's the basic material resources, right? The organization needs to be a context that provides the space-time basic stuff that people need to in order to work together on complex interdependent work. So that's condition 5, a supportive organizational context. And then finally, condition number 6 is expert team coaching. And by team coaching, I mean coaching the team as a whole. So asking good questions, intervening in the dynamic and process of the team in such a way to help the team make better and better use of its favorable performance context. This is distinct from individual coaching, which is really aimed at developing the capacities of individuals, right? So this is working with the team as a whole. You'll note that the condition here is not a team coach, or it's not team coaching by the leader. We are agnostic about who provides it. It needs to be somebody who has the expertise and who is available to the team. But we have found that there are many different ways of getting good coaching. Sometimes an external person, when the leader and the team really need to be down in the dialogue together, having somebody external keeping an eye on the process can be especially helpful. Sometimes it can be a team member, sometimes it can be the team leader. But we place it last in chronological order of the 6 conditions for a reason. And that is what we found in our research is that teams that are poorly designed, in this graph, it's the black lines, teams that don't have a compelling purpose, never agreed on norms, are doing work that doesn't make sense to be done by a team, don't have the right people, they don't benefit at all from lots of good coaching. So the slope of that line between little good coaching and lots of good coaching in that first panel is a non-significant difference. You cannot coach a badly designed team to greatness. Can't be done, right? You're swimming upstream against too strong a current. Whereas in a well-designed team, providing lots of good coaching actually does help the team, really accelerates their ability to become effective over time. And a nice parallel finding that I found in my research is that a well-designed team is also very robust. So on the right side panel here, that purple line, if you're an ineffective coach, excessively directive, new at it, providing lots of poor coaching actually does not undermine a well-designed team at all. They can actually take that in and survive it and not be particularly affected by poor coaching. So it's last in chronological order because the opportunity to really make a difference with good coaching is there when you've got a fundamentally well-designed performance context for the team in terms of the essentials and the other enablers. So there we are on the enablers: a sound structure, a supportive context, and available and expert team coaching. So once again, I'm going to ask you to reflect on the team that you care about and that you support, and respond to a poll about which of the enablers in this team that you care about needs the most attention. Is it the sound structure, the tasks, the norms, the size of the team? Is it the contextual supports and the systems in the organization? Is it the availability and expertise of team coaching? Or is it all of them about equally? And again, I'll give you a moment to comment on that, and then we'll invite you to ask questions and reflect on what's going on in your teams. How are you doing, Hannah?
About 55% have voted,
Excellent.
so waiting a little bit more. Want to get it up into 70s.
Yeah, sounds good.
All right, we're at 75%. I think that's good
Great.
enough.
I think we can close it.
All right.
So this time, all about equally and supportive organizational context are coming out. Supportive organizational context slightly in the lead above sound structure and team coaching. I guess in a group of coaches, chances are pretty good that your teams have some available expert coaching available. This is actually a little bit unusual a result for the organizational context to come out ahead of sound structure. So just curious about why you named the supportive context in particular as a challenge for your team. So what are your thoughts about how to intervene in a way to help the teams with their contextual supports? So anybody who chose supportive context or all about equally, welcome to join the conversation here. Either raise your hand in the participant profile or add your question to the chat, or come on to the mic. Jan, why do you think individual coaching doesn't improve the team? There are because it's focused on individual behaviors, and a team is a social system, and behaviors in a social system are elicited by the context and by other team members. So if you take the individual out of context and you try to shape their behavior outside that context and then put them back in the context, they're right back in the soup that elicited the behavior you're trying to change in the first place. Whereas if you're intervening directly on the dynamic of what's emerging in the team, you now have a social system that is acting on itself, right? They're looking at the pattern in the behavior. There are multiple people at once making commitments and changing aspects of how they behave, and it becomes a mutually supportive shift rather than a one-to-one outside the context. There's lots of actual research evidence on a similar phenomenon that a lot of times when we take people out of the organizational context for training and then put them back in the context, they're not able to enact new behaviors that they learned outside of the context, because there's so many. I mean, fundamentally, the message of the 6 conditions framework is that structure drives behavior. And if you put people in one structure and shape their behavior and elicit it in one structure, but then you return them to a different one, you're creating the context once again to elicit things that are already in their repertoire that you're trying to shape differently. So my usual advice around coaching is team coaching comes first when what you're trying to do is help a team. There are circumstances where individuals have particular trouble with certain things that they're having a hard time enacting in the context, and you can do some individual coaching, but it has to be with the support of the team members, right? So they have to be a part of the sort of feedback and development process. Thanks for the question. So others of you, what questions do you have about sound structure and context?
Hi, Ruth. May I comment at this stage?
Sure.
My name is Carl.
Carl, welcome.
Yeah, I actually chose the B because this supportive organizational context, correct me if I'm wrong, is somehow more strongly correlated with the organizational culture, at least in my mind, in a sense that that team that works within the organization, if it's in place where it's in a supportive space, let's put it in that way, then you are all playing in a sense in the same goal, or playing the purpose of the organizational, and versus the sound structure or team coaching. I don't know if you catch my idea over here, but it's kind of
yeah, I do actually. Yes,
okay,
you
good.
can.
So
you
this
could
is
be,
why I chose to be in a
yeah,
sense.
you could be operating in a context where the relationship between management and staff is we're trying to get as much out of you with as few resources as possible, right? That could be part of the culture. And so the stance of management is not, we are here to provide you the resources that will enable you to do your best possible work. That is indeed one circumstance in which you can see all of these contextual supports not in good shape. Another one is that many organizations are really designed around the individual performance. So, when you've driven the scorecard all the way from the top down to the front line of the organization into individual goals, you basically break the interdependencies, and then all of your systems, like how people are managed, how they're rewarded, how their performance is evaluated, is all very individualistic, and it doesn't take into account the need for collaboration across those white spaces. The third driver I often see of badly designed contextual supports and systems is sometimes we design something to solve one problem and it creates other kinds of problems. So very often when you see an information system that isn't working for the teams, it's because we designed an information system that will get a very finely divided up level of detail down to frontline people that need it, but it is never synthesized in a way that people who are looking across a broader spectrum can actually use it to see themes and patterns, right? So often we have a sort of side effect or dysfunction of the system because it was designed to serve a different problem. And fundamentally, a lot of the work that I do with teams and with leaders around the organizational context it's very rare for them to have direct control over these structures and systems. They have to learn how to exercise influence upward and outward in the organization to get the resources that the team needs in order to do well. And it may not be, we're going to redesign the whole IT system. It's we're going to make a deal in with analysts in our organization that will allow us to periodically get the kind of data we need to monitor and manage our performance. Or we're going to get an exception to reward policy, and we are going to reward this team as a whole for what it achieves. But that's a very different kind of coaching than the, down there working with the team. It's really helping the leader and the team exercise influence in their broader context. Yeah. Good. Any other questions or reflections on these enablers? I want to take you into, but please feel free to continue questions because we'll have a little time for additional discussion at the end, and I'm happy to tackle whatever else is on your mind. But I want to talk a little bit about the way I see the implications of this. I'm going to just play out the whole framework. I started with the 3 criteria of team effectiveness, which are the outputs, the essentials and the enablers, right, which are the inputs. They're the design features of teams. And I'm just going to add this term, team leadership. One of the implications of this way of thinking about and working with teams is that any act that anyone takes to get the essentials and the enablers in place for their team and keep them in place is an act of team leadership. That's what we mean by team leadership. So it's not necessarily a person who does all of that. Very often in organizations, there's a sponsor who conceived of the reason to have a team in the first place, and they really own responsibility for that compelling purpose. Whereas we may have somebody who leads the day-to-day activities of the team, and they may have the accountability for creating those sound structures or intervening to create a more supportive context. So multiple people serve leadership functions, and any act that is about getting the essentials and enablers in place, in our view, is an act of team leadership. There's a middle part of this model here, and Richard and I have found that there are 3 task-related processes, not interpersonal processes, task-related processes that you can measure, you can observe in the short run, that are highly predictive of whether the team turns out well in terms of its performance and getting better over time and contributing to the growth and satisfaction of members. Those 3 processes are effort. How hard is the team working? Are they operating in ways that build shared commitment to the team and its work? Strategy. Is the team inventing uniquely suited approaches to how they work rather than falling into mindless habitual routines? And knowledge and skill, meaning is the team using the full complement of knowledge and skill in the team as they proceed with the work. And these 3 key task processes are driven by the essentials and the enablers, right? So to the extent that we have a clear purpose and we get the information that we need and we have norms of conduct, we will develop uniquely suited strategic approaches to how we get the work done, right? So there are multiple essentials and enablers involved in sort of creating the recipe for each of these 3 processes, but these are the behavioral dynamics that we can tap into and see in the short run that really give us a clue about whether a team is going to turn out well in those 3 criteria of effectiveness in the long run. And if you're curious about, Richard and I wrote a paper called A Theory of Team Coaching that really plays out the role of these 3 key task processes, both in terms of what drives them and ways in which we can intervene in teams to support them in developing effective key task processes when the other conditions are in good shape for the team. So that's the overall model. And now let me speak to a little bit about what I see the important implications for us as team development professionals who want to work with teams to improve their effectiveness. And if I haven't given it away by now, I've long been both a practitioner and a researcher. So I've always had a foot in both in practice and in research. And the way that I think about the implications here is, yes, there are relationships between processes that emerge in teams and the effectiveness of the team as a whole, but those processes are created and driven by these conditions. That's what elicits and launches teams on a particular trajectory. And therefore, our main point of leverage as team coaches to make a difference to team effectiveness is really addressing those conditions and doing a good quality assessment of whether those conditions are in good shape, and working with the team leader sometimes, or working with the team as a whole sometimes, to engage around improving the performance conditions under which they work. And so, my colleagues and I have drawn this distinction between what I have come to think of as structural coaching versus emergent process coaching. Structural coaching is really working with the team and the team leader around improving their designs. It's acting on those conditions, versus spending our time and energy on the emergent processes. And indeed, one of the things that I often do is I ask coaches, or I ask team leaders, where are you putting your the majority of your energy? And I'll just share with you Richard Hackman's and my 60-30-10 rule. We estimate that 60% of the really critical acts of leadership happen before the team even exists. Meaning it's in the intelligent preparations. It's the thinking through, do I even need a team? If so, what is the purpose of that team? How would I articulate that in a way that members will find genuinely compelling, clear, challenging, consequential? Who can contribute to that purpose? What resources are they going to need? What are some norms and work practices that would contribute to their effectiveness? How do I ensure that they get coaching? That's 60% of the really critical influences. 30% is breathing life into that great design work the first time the team convenes. It's getting the team off to the best possible start, helping them to grapple with that purpose and the resources they have to draw upon, both in each other and in the larger context. And 10% is the hands-on coaching around the day-to-day processes and the interactions of the teams as they proceed with the work. And for us, the implications around this have been get to team leaders and to teams as frequently as you can before they actually exist. But much of the work that we wind up doing is effectively what I would call a team relaunch. It's helping them grapple with the aspects of their design that is not in good shape, and to shape those things up, and then to get off to the best possible start. It's pushing the pause button and saying, this current configuration is not working. Let us reconfigure it into a really excellent design, and then breathe life into it so it's on a positive trajectory right from the very beginning. I mean, one of the fundamentals about this idea of conditions thinking is that a team is a complex system right from the very beginning of its life gets onto a trajectory. And so what you're trying to do is breathe life into it in a way that it's on a positive trajectory, and then it can chart its own course to greatness around accomplishing great things and getting better and better over time, and contributing to the growth and learning of the individual members. So I'll talk through a couple of examples of how we actually use this kind of thinking in practice. One approach is, this is actually something I've been doing for years, is to come in with a little report card in a live session with teams and teach them a little bit about the framework, and ask them to self-assess on, are we a real team? Do we have a compelling purpose? Do we have the right people, etc.? And they literally give themselves grades on a report card. With some teams, I've then drawn up the triangles and then said, go put a red dot wherever you think the team needs the most work, go put a green dot wherever you think the team is strongest. It's one way of harvesting directly from the team in real time, a diagnostic that would allow you then to begin setting some priorities for work for the team. So for example, the first time I met with that COVID clinic team, I didn't have time, they didn't have time to be doing a long-term detailed assessment. We did lightning focused coaching sessions. I think over the course of 8 weeks, we met 8 or 10 times for no more than 45 minutes. That's what they had because of the nature of the way that they were working. And the first thing that we did was do a little self-assessment around the essentials. That's how we discovered in the particular team, the COVID team that I was talking about, that really purpose was a good place for them to start. In this particular example, I'm sharing, my colleague Krista Lowe and I worked with all of the process leads of teams throughout a really large enterprise who were leading the implementation of Workday in a Fortune 10 organization. And one of the things that we discovered in doing this kind of diagnostic with them is that the team leads were feeling very inauthentic in trying to convey the consequentiality of the work. Basically, they were saying Workday is, we've invented all different kinds of solutions for HR management in this firm. They're all fit for purpose. They're not global. None of them are the same in different parts of the enterprise, but in a lot of cases, Workday is worse than what we already have. And so finding a way to say, what we are doing is building a platform for alignment, right? To have the best possible HR systems in the future. And that's what the implementation of Workday was about, was a key consequence of the work, and allowed them to go back to their teams and raise the consequentiality of what they were being asked to do with a much better understanding of their purpose. So that's just using a diagnostic, a report card diagnostic, and a dialogue in real time. This is an example of a team. One of the things Anna mentioned in her introduction is that Richard and I and our colleague Erin Lehman took all of the best of our measures of features of teams, and we created something called the Team Diagnostic Survey. We conducted validation studies of it, and we published the validation studies in a peer-reviewed journal. So there's a journal in the Journal of Applied Behavioral Sciences in 2005. We actually published the validation of this assessment. And what it does, as you can see, is it gives you an assessment of a team's standing on the 6 conditions, the 3 key task processes, and the outcomes. There are detailed breakdowns of each of these elements, but I wanted to just give you a snapshot of what it looks like to do a formal assessment of a team. This happens to be the IT leadership team in a hospital. And at time 1 in September of 29, it was pretty clear that they needed work around their compelling purpose, the sound structure and supportive context. They were seeing decrements in all of their key task processes, and they were seriously disappointed with how well they were serving their many constituencies. This was a much longer term engagement. The Team Diagnostic Survey is conducted by having all of the members of the team respond to the survey, and then it's aggregated to the team level. In this case, Krister Lowe was the team coach, and this was a 9-month engagement with the coach, with sessions with the team as a whole every 6 to 8 weeks. It began with a full day relaunch, where the team grappled with its compelling purpose and getting the team size right and the kinds of tasks and norms they needed. That was the first thing that they did. And then there were ongoing coaching engagements with them over time, cycles of helping the team to become increasingly self-coaching and to improve the quality of their work. This happens to be a nice one where we can actually see the results at 9 months later, where the conditions are actually in considerably better shape. And as a consequence, you can see they're considerably more satisfied and positive about the degree to which they're really delivering for their stakeholders. So that's a second example of how to use this kind of conditions thinking. A third one that I've, I'm going to come back to this poll. If I want to share a third one that I'm using increasingly frequently, and that is using the 6 conditions framework to develop team leaders. So the world would be a much better place, in my view, if every team leader understood the conditions that need to be created in order for a collaboration to produce brilliant teamwork and to really deliver for their constituents and stakeholders. And so increasingly what we are doing is sharing the 6 conditions framework in an executive and team leader development, some in MBA and executive MBA programs, some within enterprises, engaging the team leaders around assessing a team that they lead and that they care about, and engaging them in peer consultation and group coaching around improving the designs of their teams. And often part of what we're doing is also developing their ability. We've created a course in which we teach leaders right from the very beginning a great design process and how to design their team and get them off to the best possible start, so that the little bit of hands-on coaching they need to do is the highest leverage that it can be. I actually think I'm gonna skip that last poll in the authority matrix because it's issues that we have talked about before. But just these are just some of the implications for this 6 conditions thinking about how I think we as team development professionals can make a really high leverage difference in the degree to which collaborations that aspire to do great things are actually able to achieve that. I do believe that all of our most important problems and our highest aspirations are only going to be solved by really brilliant collaboration. And so that's what I'm up to, and spreading this framework and spreading this work and engaging others around it. So let me stop there in that case. This is just some shared resources that you might want to look into. So the team coaching article that I mentioned is the first article here. The validation study of the team diagnostic survey is the second. And then there's a couple of other key publications in here that if you want to dig deeper into these ideas and read more, those are some of the recommended articles. We also have on our website, which is 16 Conditions, we have a blog and we have a podcast that we have been doing that teaches the framework and shares a lot of illustrations of how we apply the framework in real organizational contexts. So that's also a way that you can tune in and explore deeply about this. So Raya, thank you for the question. Raya asks, in the data, did you notice differences between American, European, and Asian companies? We have done studies using this framework all around the world, and here's what I would say. The 6 conditions are relevant across contexts. What is different across contexts, cultural contexts, is the kinds of challenges that you face either in implementing teams in the first place or with certain of the conditions. So for example, in highly collectivist contexts, it's much easier to implement a team-based system. That's a natural way for people to work. They're eager to collaborate. But in collectivist kinds of contexts, there is a tendency to try and reach consensus about everything. And as a consequence, you can get a lot of problems around the clarity of team purpose. As I said, for example, teams are not good at clarity. Right, you're better off asking an individual to create that clarity and for the team to shape that up. But that is not necessarily a structure that is typically used. So you might really be hurting around the clarity of purpose of teams in those sorts of contexts. Let's see if I can give a flip side example. In highly individualist contexts, we very often see problems in the supportive organizational context. So those teams tend to score a lot lower on reward systems, information systems, the availability of training and technical consultation, because the systems are designed to promote individual excellence rather than to contribute to team effectiveness. So the particular challenges you face around implementing the 6 conditions do vary from context to context, but their relevance does not. I always found it a great irony that leadership teams have the most control over the context of any other team in the organization, and they tend to score very low on supportive organizational context. So they have done very little to create and ensure that they have the organizational supports that they need to operate as a team.
Thank you, Ruth, and want to give you still I hope we have a couple of minutes, everybody, still to give Ruth a chance to share how we can learn more about your system and how you can learn more about your special way of working with teams. I think it's been really interesting. Would you like to share something about that?
For some reason, I don't have the actual link to our website, but it is, yeah, it's there. It's https:16conditions.com. Yep. That's our website. I would recommend starting with the podcast, because that will It'll walk you through the framework and its implications for your work. And Krister and I, they're each about a half an hour episode. And Krister and I share a lot of examples of bringing this work to life. And most recently, the podcast has started. We've started talking directly with leaders who are using this in their practice, and also with some researchers who are deepening the understanding of the 6 conditions framework and influences on the effectiveness of teams. That's one great place to start. We also do training and certifications in the use of the team diagnostic survey, and you'll find those on our website as well. So if you're interested in learning how to use the instrument and a basic certification, which teaches the framework, how to look at and interpret the report, we have a level 1 certification that is self-paced. It's all online, and you can enroll on that on our website. We also have what we call the Advanced Practitioner Workshop, and that is all focused on practice. So you have to have done the basic one to do it, but we work with a small group of team development professionals. We demonstrate with you a lot of these practices that we use to teach the framework, to debrief the survey, to intervene with teams around compelling purpose and right people and sound structure. And then we also put you into teams to practice those things yourselves with a different case of a real team in organization. So lots and lots of opportunities to dive in and to add this to your repertoire if you'd like. We also have a masterclass that we run once a year, and that's by application for people who have used the framework and the survey with at least 3 teams, and then they can come to our masterclass as well, which is really focused on the ongoing coaching of teams, and again, very, very invested in developing the practice.
All right. Thank you so much. I think, unfortunately, we're not going to be able to continue with the Q&A. I think everybody has reserved until 6:30 here for us. So, thank you so much, Ruth, for taking the time to spend this time with us. It's been really interesting, and I'm looking forward to going through all of these resources again and looking at what you've shared with us. Everybody will get this PowerPoint, or actually as PDF, and I will also be posting the video on the ICF Finland YouTube channel. And I want to also remind you of the upcoming webinar. We have the webinar in August with Alicia Hollinger. The theme is A Future Without Coaches. So I hope you're curious enough to come join us for that, to see what that's about. So thank you so very much. I really appreciate it. I hope you have enjoyed yourself as well. We look forward to learning more with you in all of these different resources that you have shared.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so very much. It's been wonderful to have all of you join us. We've been quite a few, I think. On a whole, I didn't catch exactly how many, but I saw at some point we were 50 something, and I'm not sure. But yeah, it's been wonderful to have you all join us.
Thank you all. It was a pleasure meeting you.
As you see, there's a lot of thank yous coming in the chat box. Yeah. So wonderful. I wish we had more time, but time flies when you're having fun. Yeah.
Thanks,
Very
guys.
interesting.
Be well.
Yeah. You too. Bye-bye.
Take care.